And welcome back. My next guest is Craig Wertheim, a U.S. Army veteran. Welcome, Craig.
Hi, thank you.
Craig, delighted to have you here. I've known you for a number of years, and you're involved with the movement to create a memorial up at the Haverstraw Bay Park to commemorate those that have lost their lives in service to our country after 9/11, Operation Desert Storm and Iraqi Freedom. So we're going to talk about that towards the end of this segment. But this segment is our veterans segment, and it's an opportunity for the community to learn about some of the veterans that live here in Rockland County. So with that, I'm just going to start off and ask you a little bit about your background. Maybe tell our viewers about yourself, where you were born, raised, and
Sure. Well, I was born in Queens, New York, and when I was 5, we moved up to Rockland County, and we moved to Suffern. I've lived there the rest of my life. My parents had a house there, and I got married. My wife was from Long Island, and I said, "Where do you want to live?" And she chose Rockland. So we stayed. We love it. We've raised 2 kids here, and very successful kids, and we're happy. And that's where that's kind of my background.
what do you do professionally now?
I'm the vice president for Scabal USA, which is a luxury fabric and clothing brand in the U.S. The company's based out of Brussels, and I look after the U.S. and Canadian operations for them.
Oh, that's great. So, Craig, let's talk a little bit about your service. What branch of the military you served in?
In the Army, I was an engineer officer. I was commissioned in 1992 through ROTC after college. And
Where'd you go to college?
I went to Ramapo College. First I went to RCC for 2 years and then transferred to Ramapo. And then I did ROTC through Seton Hall University.
Oh, great. So so you did ROTC, and then you so after you went through college through ROTC, you had a commitment to serve within the military, correct?
Sure. While in ROTC, I was also in a local reserve unit as a cadet in Orangetown on Western Highway with the 854th Engineer Battalion. So I really started in the reserves in 1990, was commissioned an engineer officer. I went off to my officer basic class and came back in 1992 as a lieutenant, and I served my entire career in the reserves. First with the 854th Engineer Battalion locally, and then went to the 411th Engineer Brigade, which is up in Orange County. And I went back and forth between the 411th and the 854th my whole career as an engineer officer. In 2006, I was back with the 411th as an operations officer, and I was there for deployment to Iraq for 06-07.
So let's talk a little bit about your service in Iraq during that period of time. So you saw combat. You were injured in service to our country as well. So let's talk a little bit about your experience in Iraq. Walk our viewers through what that was like, that deployment in 2006 and 2007.
Sure. I was brought on active duty in the end of March, beginning of April of 2006. I was identified within the brigade in the operations section to be the counter-improvised explosive device officer in charge of that section for our operations area. And what that entailed was for me to learn all about what they call IEDs, the bombs they put on the roads and hide, and that were causing death and destruction along the major routes in Iraq. So I jumped around. First we were at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. Then I was at Fort Leonard Wood. Myself and my senior NCO, who had been my first sergeant when I was a company commander, we had a relationship. So him and I went around to learn as much as we can. This was all new to us. It was really new to the Army itself. And my job in Iraq was to work with 2 engineer battalions that were combat engineer battalions, and their job was to clear the roads, either in support of direct combat operations or on a daily basis for the main supply route. So we spent a lot of time training, basically until August when we deployed into Iraq, and we fell in on a unit that was already there. And I worked for about a week and a half to 2 weeks with my counterpart, and they explained what they did, and we then worked out a plan of how we were going to handle the operations going forward. And so basically for the next year, it was my job to make sure that our engineer units were on the roads at the right time. There was a lot of analysis kind of in the back office. In addition to that, it was my job to go out and work with the line units that were on the combat missions, and basically going out and finding the IEDs. And there's a couple of ways you find them. One, you see them, and that's easy. Two, you identify them, an area that's been disturbed, and you call in EOD, the explosive ordnance disposal people, and they either blow them up, or the engineers will blow them up in place depending on the size of the bomb, or you are attacked by them, or you roll over them. And on 4 occasions, I was in a vehicle that was blown up, in different degrees. The worst was probably in January of 2007 in Ramadi, Iraq. I was on a patrol that we were interrogating a spot, and they actually pulled out with the arm of the vehicle, what they're called basically it's like a fork and a spoon called a spork, and that would actually reach in and pull out the bomb. And when we pulled them out, there were 3 artillery shells that were attached to it, and there was a wire that ran into a building, and it exploded on our vehicle, and I had a concussion and was wounded from that, and received the Purple Heart from that action.
Well, and thank you for your service, and service comes at a cost, and you bear the scars of that as well. So, thank you.
To me, I was in for the full 20 years. So I served from 1990 to 2010. I loved what I did. It was great being in the reserves, and every month the government sent me a check, and I look at my time in Iraq. That was my time to pay back everything I gained from the Army. I definitely gained more than the Army got, so to speak, in terms of leadership and managerial learning, and different types of expertise in dealing with people and problem solving.
So I noticed on your lapel you have several decorations. So why don't you just
Sure. The purple one is the Purple Heart that I received for wounds from the combat. The second is the Bronze Star for the service for what I did in Iraq, and then the first one on top is the Combat Action Badge, which I received from our first engagement with the insurgents or terrorists that we were dealing with. Similar to the Combat Infantryman's Badge, just it's given to non-infantry soldiers.
Wow, it's very impressive. Thank you again for your service. So, you finished up your service in Iraq, and then you've come home and you've gone back into civilian life. You're now out of the Army in 2010, but now you've got another mission, and it's a mission that's probably just as important, because it's a mission to raise awareness and never forget the sacrifice of those that served in a number of deployments in recent times. So let's talk a little bit about the county memorial to honor those that we lost in Operation Desert Storm and in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Sure. About 3 years ago, Howard Golden, who's the commander of the Purple Heart chapter that I am in Rockland County, that I'm a member of, and the late Jerry Dinellin, who was director of Veteran Services for Rockland at the time, came to me and a group of other veterans and said, there's no monument memorial to the servicemen and women of this era. What do you think about putting a committee together and raising money and working to make that happen? immediately I said yes. Part of what I've done since I've retired, I try to help as many veterans as I can. I'm a little older than the average veteran in terms of this era, and so whatever I can give back, I still try to give back, and what time allows. This was a great idea. They proposed it to the county, and the county offered the land that overlooks the 9/11 memorial. And we decided that we'd bring on other veterans from Desert Storm, Desert Shield, Desert Storm in 1990, all the way through to today, and encompass all of them, because it really started back then. And for me personally, I graduated from basic training on the day that Saddam went into Kuwait, and that, to me, I got off the plane and knew nothing about what was going on, and it was a cadet basic training, and I wasn't committed to the Army at that point. So the first thing, of course, my mother said was, "You're not going to go through with this now." And I said, "Well, how can I not, after I learned what was going on?" And so I was in the reserves during that time, and I was a cadet during that time. So I've been around this whole era. So we went about, we worked on a few designs. We finally came up with the group that's been helping us, and it's made up of.
And what we're looking at now are some of the renditions. You can kind of explain.
Sure, absolutely.
about the memorial. So as we're looking at the photo, we can see there's the blast barriers. Maybe speak to those.
Okay, so we wanted to make it so that any veteran from this era would understand and right away know that this is their memorial monument. And so we used the blast walls that are up around Iraq, Afghanistan, kind of as a alleyway that people can walk down. And on those blast walls is a tribute to the 8 service men and women that lost their lives from Rockland County. They gave more than anybody else, and their families deserve a place to go and to be able to reflect. And we're hoping that this will help with the healing process, though you'll never really heal from that. The back wall is a timeline that starts in 1990, and it continues through today. In the middle of the wall is a gold star to represent the Gold Star families of the fallen. Just in front of the wall is a helmet, rifle, and boots. That is symbolic to the memorials that we hold overseas for those that we lose, and so that will be there. In addition, we have a statue of a female Marine and her dog, and we replicated it off of Megan Levy, who is a Rockland County resident, and she and her dog Rex supported combat operations in finding bombs, and were wounded. Both were wounded in the service while they were performing their duty.
Right. It's a beautiful design. It's elegant, yet it's a lot of detail, but very simple at the same time. I really want to commend you and the group that's working on this. How can people support this project?
Sure. Well, we've received funds really 3 ways. One is from the state. We were fortunate enough to get 2 grants from the state of New York. Rockland County has also given us money towards the project, and then of course private donations. So if anybody is interested, they can, the Military Order of the Purple Heart / Monument Project, the check can be written out to, and it could be dropped off at the American Legion post in Pomona, at post 1600 at the American Legion, and
that's Kiersing Edwards.
Kiersing Edwards American Legion post, and it will go towards that.
Great. So we'll put the contact up at the end, how folks can contribute and support this very worthy project. Craig, I do want to thank you for being such a wonderful guest And I want to thank you for your service. You exemplify the idea of a citizen soldier in our country, and your selfless service to our country over 20 years in the reserves, and your active duty portion of that, and of course, the service that caused you to be injured in the line of duty as well. So we thank you for that, and we also thank you and really recognize your desire and your push and your efforts with Howard Golden and this committee to bring about this memorial, because it's really much needed. A number of years from now, folks aren't going to remember as time goes beyond, but there was tremendous sacrifice that was borne by hundreds of thousands and by thousands that lost their lives, including 8 Rocklanders, and they should never be forgotten. And by your efforts, they won't be. So thank you, Craig.
Oh, thank you very much. And the dedication is going to be November 11th, 2018 at the site.
Great.
So it should be done by then.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So coming up, it will be Elaine Alphabaum, the Superintendent of Parks and Recreation. Please stay tuned. So just